Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast live here on Tuesday, June the 3rd. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, reporter and writer here at the 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media, wherever you get that, at JT_Ruhnke. OTAs are now, at least for the media, officially in the books after today's practice, and I am here joined by my co-host, the lovely, the wonderful Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief of M.L.ROSE Network, one half of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over on Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are you, my friend? But more importantly, how is that cat?
Oh, man, Pepper, as we have decided to name her. That was my wife's idea. Named after Pepper Potts. We're Marvel nerds, so if you guys didn't know that, Bucky is actually named after the Winter Soldier. Named the kitten Pepper Potts, or her more aptly titled superhero name, Rescue. So she's doing great. We're pooping, we're peeing. All the bodily functions seem to be working pretty well. Her goopy eye from the upper respiratory infection has cleared up. We got her to the vet early Saturday morning, and they were surprised that she had made it through the night after I snagged her. But we're doing well right now. She's even starting to show a little bit of her personality. And if you've ever had like tiny kittens, their claws are like hypodermic needles that are just piercing your hand every time you reach down to pet her. So my hand and my feet are all scratched up. She likes to chew on toes. So I've got a lot of pictures of her chewing on my toes in my camera roll that I will spare you guys the foot content for. But
that's great to hear, and we're glad that she is safe and secure around here, with people even in the comments here saying, Derek saying, I heard about the cat. You're a hero, Stoney. That's similar to the way that I guess Derek got his cat, Maddie.
Good on you, Derek. Good on you.
Diamond saying, hell yeah, kittens rule. My wife and I are wrestling fans, so we named our newest one Sting.
That rules so hard.
All of you guys here in the comment section. If you want to join this comment section, talk about your cats, the Cam Ward content that you guys so desperately want from me today, and we are bringing it to you, don't worry, and so many other things. Your questions about the Titans and what I saw at practice today. Do us a favor and head on over to the 440 Sports YouTube channel, where you can join everyone like Derek, who says, what's up, guys? Sorry I've missed a few episodes. Good to see you back, Derek. Always welcome. Bustin' Diamond saying, tighten up and butter me up with Cam Ward content. Eddie saying, good evening, lads. Jacob, hello there. Bustin' Diamond saying, looking forward to the show, boys. Not looking forward to having to mow the lawn in this dreadful heat. I will say, it was a hot one out there at Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park today. But we had a nice little breeze coming off the water bank out there, so it did help a little bit. But man, there were plenty of people trying to seek refuge underneath the awning in the corner of the football field from the heat today. So that it definitely was hot out. Eddie saying, need that Jackson Slater content. Jacob Saint saying, let's make fun of everyone who was complaining about Ward not getting enough Cam Ward content in May. Yes, I agree with you there. Jacob says, you didn't name her T'Challa, which
no. I gotta rescue I think a literal Black Panther for that.
I see. that is very true. That must be your next adventure. You got to go into the woods and just find a random panther. And that's going to be your third one. But good to see you all here today. Excited to talk some Titans content. And before we do that, one more thing. Have to give a huge shout out to our presenting sponsor, M.L.ROSE, 7 locations in the greater Nashville area. Awesome food, awesome drinks. Cannot go wrong. Thank you to them for sponsoring the show. More on them later, and our other sponsor, Sinkers Beverages, as well. Let's get into what I saw today at Tennessee Titans practice that was available to the media. Play some clips here for you guys, so you guys get your Cam Ward action that I know you all love. We got some Cam Ward and these quarterbacks throwing, along with some wide receiver content as well today. But just a few notes on practice today. there was this big message that today was a third down day. They were running a lot of third down drills, it was the message. And they were talking about how big of a day that was going to be for them. As Cam Ward here, just unreal stuff sometimes.
It's beautiful.
To different levels. So there was a lot of attempts to convert on third down. Not a lot of them were successful. So it was in fact a third down day, but I think the defense also had their fair share of success today. And then some other guys really came up big time. Mike Brown, Jamari Harris, some of those names that we haven't talked a lot about, who, once again, it's against air, no pads on, so you can't really say a lot, but some guys look really good.
I have a question for you, because for those watching that might not know, I was not at OTAs today. I still had to work my shitty desk job, so I wasn't out there watching it. But would you say that this was like, was it really the defense playing well, or was it the offense kind of shooting themselves in the foot?
I'd say it's a mix of both, right? They're obviously with some different, with different quarterbacks in there, you're not always going to get the same success. I will say that I think Cam Ward had a good day for all intents and purposes. Not the greatest day. Certainly was missing on some of the connections with his wide receivers. The timing was not there today to the fullest that maybe it can be. But so he had, up and down day, not to say he had a bad day, like up and down, I think is how I'd put it. Like he made some really, really nice throws and some completions. And then other ones, he just threw either right behind the wide receiver who wasn't able to catch it, or the ball completely sailed over because the wide receiver and the quarterback were not on the same page. Like those types of things happened a lot today. But the defense, I think, did still show up. There was a couple plays where Ward hit nice shots down the field that I think honestly would have been sacks if it was a real game. So you have to take those with a grain of salt, things like that. The defense, you can't really quantify what the defense can do sometimes with these drills without pads on. And so I would say it definitely was a mix of both. And so in 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, that's a lot of what the work was here today. Just a few notes from those periods, I think Cam Ward showed a little different side of him. I know we talked last week about how Cam Ward was, people were saying he was pushing the ball down the field, not taking a lot of his checkdowns. We were talking about the difference between that and maybe how Will Levis started out last year as well, but did not press as much down the field today, I would say. He definitely still worked the middle of the field, but when he was able to, he took some of his check downs, specifically hit two good tight window throws to Ridley and Colton Dow that I thought were pretty impressive, I think. Eddie saying here, tracking from Wyatt, Levis has the better completions percentage. Hint, hint at Rams. Come get your guy. Second round pick, please. I will say also among the quarterbacks, there is no question that behind Cam, Will Levis is the next best quarterback on this roster by far. I think there's some debate whether Tim Boyle or Brandon Allen were who's next after that. I think both didn't have great days. Maybe I just caught Tim Boyle on a bad stretch there, but I watched Tim Boyle just airmail two balls over a running back's head on check down routes, and they had to keep
over the running back.
Yeah, over the running back. Just simple.
Like 10 yards away.
Yeah, he's just going out like this, and it's a simple little over his head twice. And so that maybe that's kind of clouding my impressions. Maybe Brandon Allen wasn't as good either today, but like just from those two alone, I said I don't want any part of this. The bottom line is that like the second best quarterback on the day was Will Levis, who also had, I think, a pretty impressive throw in 7-on-7s as well. I know I was listening on my way home from the Ascension St. Thomas Sports Park today. Blaine Bishop on Cover 2 on 104.5 The Zone said that Levis had a play that was like a wowie type of throw. And that was the one I saw. Levis hit a nice like back shoulder fade route to Van Jefferson down the field. It was very well covered, and Will Levis put it right in his basket, which, by the way, Van Jefferson still just in like, especially if you look for number 11 on these drills, there's just something different about him right now. And I know it's not pads, but like he looks fast, he looks fluid, he looks quick. Like I was very impressed with Van Jefferson getting to see hands-on today at practice. So impressive stuff from Van Jefferson, and that ball from Levis was really, really good. So yeah, a good mixture of the middle of the field throws down the field, but then also starting to incorporate some of that check down work, some other different types of things that you need Cam to do, right? Like it's not obviously like it's nice to see him do his bread and butter and work that middle of the field and make those tight window throws, but that's not always going to be what happens, for this team and whatnot. And so I do think that it's a step in the right direction is how I would quantify it, right? You need days like this, I think, as let's see, I know someone, Alex here in the comments said, these are the type of days that can help Cam improve. Like, I think, it's not always going to be these huge days where he's wowing everybody, right? You need some of the mundane mixed in to grow.
I kind of like that it's happening kind of early in the summer too, because last year, to go back to this, it was all hunky-dory with Will Levis all summer long until later on into the preseason. But now maybe this can help kind of reset expectations a little bit. Like, oh yeah, this guy is still a rookie. I would be curious, JT, because you said something in there that kind of had me at attention a little bit, and not in a sexual way, but the idea that Cam is throwing behind receivers in practice, that is something that showed up on the tape. I felt like I was crazy because I felt like I was the only one saying like, hey, he's got a lot of these balls that on these crossing routes, he's throwing a little bit behind, the guy's having to slow down or adjust to turn around and catch. I would be curious. I don't know that much. I don't know enough about quarterback mechanics to understand exactly why that might be happening, but it sounds like it's something that he's going to have to improve on. Like, I don't know if it's just a timing thing, if it's an anticipation thing, if there is something mechanically like with the footwork, the arm angle, all that stuff that can cause it. But to me, that is at least a little concerning, because I do think it's something that we saw show up on his tape at times, and it would be a bigger issue at the next level when you anticipate that those windows, the throwing windows, are going to be a lot tighter than they were at Miami.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, it's hard because, unfortunately with these practices, it's like you write down your notes and I try to keep track of like which ones were behind. I know for a fact, and by the way, like just to get this out there as well, unlike last week, Cam Ward had the lion's share of reps today. Like me and friend of the show, Easton Freeze, kind of tag teamed keeping track of the reps and how they were distributed. And I think we came to the conclusion that it was like 50% of the reps today were Cam, another 25% were Levis, and then the last 25% were split up between Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle. So, getting a lot of shots, you're not going to convert them all. Certainly. I would say that it is, not 50% or so is where I would put it. As Paul saying, rep talk, you reported. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate you doing that. I no quantifiable numbers here, just saying abouts and other ones like that. So, I would say also another guy who had a pretty good day, which I think fans are going to going to hear today. Xavier Restrepo, I think, had a pretty impressive day. Ward had one where he went to Restrepo across the middle. The ball was thrown behind him from Ward. So once again, wink, wink. Still made the catch. Restrepo also had a really nice underneath rep as well from Boyle against Cedric Gray. I thought he looked, like that guy that you want to play in the slot, not this, like, I thought he ran the route pretty fluid for a guy that we've been talking about being pretty slow. So I was pretty impressed with him there. And then Another one, third down, Ward to Restrepo, good route by Restrepo, and even better catch to convert on 11 on 11. So, I think today, once again, it's hard to say because of pads and whatnot, right? But at the end of the day, right, it is a good sign to see him making these types of plays.
Are we starting to come around on Restrepo? Well, hold on. I want to back up a little bit. Pump the brakes. I was never out on Restrepo. I just thought the expectations were a little too lofty. Like, we were still talking about a UDFA that tested pretty poorly, but I mean, it sounds like he's kind of carving out a spot on this team so far.
It certainly is when you talk about, Cam going in at 5 a.m. with all of these guys, right? Like, he is part of that group that is going in early and is going to really try to make this team and do whatever he needs to do to make this team. Like, once again, and yeah, Coach Will says Hot Read hates X. Like,
chat's on fire today.
There's a lot of guys. Derek saying Restrepo making the roster, just embrace it. I never said that he will not make the roster. I said he would have an uphill battle to make that roster. And certainly right now, with the 7-on-7 and the 11-on-11, he's been someone who's been impressive. A guy who is a hard worker and is someone who is making the most of every opportunity that he's been given so far. Also, I think there is still a question of if Restrepo is going to be, let's say, slot 2 on this team behind Tyler Lockett. Like, he has to do something else to contribute to this team than just be simply slot 2 behind Lockett right now, right? Like, that has to come on special teams. That has to do something. And whether he can be a returner, whether he can be, I don't think at all there's a chance he could be a gunner, right, on special teams.
Yeah.
But like helping somewhere on special teams is going to have to be important for Restrepo in order to make this team.
So was he getting some reps at kick returner? Because I feel like Zach brought that up last week on F Words, that he was kind of in the mix for kick return duties. But I can't remember if that was just a discussion or if there were actually reps that had been seen or what.
I don't know if he took reps today, but I know that people have said like he's been in the rotation, right?
Okay,
and so
cool.
Like, he is actively trying to make the most of his opportunity, and especially today, there were 3 catches at least that I can talk about during the 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s that I thought were really impressive, and so he definitely is making his mark right now on this team. And
there you go.
I do think that he right now projects to be in the mix for that slot 2 guy, wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 on this team right now, especially with guys like, Treylon Burks coming back from his injury, but was able to participate a good deal today. Looked to be running pretty much almost full speed today as well. So, obviously, we're not putting any stock in Treylon Burks, but good to see him back healthy. And then Bryce Oliver, who just hasn't simply done really, not made any of like the plays that a guy like Restrepo or Van Jefferson or any of those guys have made so far in OTA periods.
So the people wanted their Xavier Restrepo talk. There you have it. You have your Xavier Restrepo talk.
Yeah, and Kenneth saying, would it be easier to hide Bryce Oliver on a practice squad than Restrepo? Like, I don't know, right? That is the question. Potentially, I think that there is a way that, like, if you want to keep all these guys around, it's like, yeah, well, based on all the hype and everything that we've seen from Restrepo, and obviously it's a hard conversation because if no team was willing to draft him in April, right? Are they really going to come around to him like on a practice squad? Like, I don't know. That's the question there. But like, it's going to be a battle all summer long, and it's going to be really interesting to see.
And I know that personnel departments are not foolproof, so to speak. But I mean, these guys have extensive staffs that scout all of these guys. Like, I don't know that anybody that's worth a shit is going to be able to hide on the practice squad, regardless of who they are.
Yeah, I agree there. Let's see. Cristoforo says any stock in Colton Dowell. I mean, he made a good play today back on the field. Certainly will be vying for a spot on special teams as a gunner, I think, for sure. And so, like, that's another piece of the puzzle, right? Like, you need guys on the outside who can be gunners. And I remember when Colton Dowell was in his rookie year, was playing gunner pretty well, and to the point where like he was being a healthy contributor to this team. And so I don't know if we can put any stock, but he is a guy who, once again, has, I think has made some strides to get back on the field, and I think is certainly back in the mix here. Let's get to some of your other questions before we continue on here. Jacob saying, I'm watching y'all on the TV and I have no idea what the M.L.ROSE logo is. Is that a gremlin under a crescent moon? No, that is an owl. Eddie's saying it is an owl. That is correct. That it is an owl. I don't know any reason behind that. But
I don't either. I'll have to ask him the next time I'm there.
Yeah. So Kenneth saying the Strepper agenda in full pole swinging. Very good. He says Restrepo going to be our number 3 by the end of the year. Wishful thinking. I think that I'm glad that people have that type of optimism for him. I wouldn't say that is a lock, right? But because I still think there are 5 receivers ahead of him right now on this roster. And so that would be a incredible swing, but certainly looked promising and was making the most of his opportunity today.
I mean, Bustin's high on hopium right now. I don't know that we can take anything that he says seriously.
This is true. This is very true. Let's see. Coach Will saying any consistency with wide receiver tight end groupings? Not right now, from at least what I can say that sticks out, right? Like, everyone is just running with everyone. And I have a couple of clips here that we'll get to in just a second that talk about trying to find which wide receiver plays the best position. And it's all about finding how versatile these guys can be. Because I think at the end of the day, like, another wrench in the Restrepo machine there, right, could be like if Chimere Dike just ends up being this guy that they can deploy at any 3 of the positions, X, Y, or X, Y, or Z, right? Like, or XF or Z. He can, like, there's another one, right? Like, why do we have Restrepo if we can just have DK play a big slot or something like that, right? Like, I think that's once again another piece of the puzzle. And so I think I think it's going to be really interesting. Let's see what else we have here. Jordan Pace saying, I just found a free beer token to M.L.ROSE that I got in like 2017. Do you think they'll accept it? Yeah, I'm sure you can try. So
I'll tell you what, Jordan, if you go to M.L.ROSE and they don't accept it, send me your Venmo, DM me on Twitter, and I will buy you a beer.
There you go. Kenneth saying, if he showcases in the preseason, probably, like, I would think it's pretty much a done deal there, but otherwise, everyone playing with everyone right now. Like I said, reps are, someone's getting Cam Ward's getting a decent amount now, especially in those group stages, but everyone is still working in and mixing in and whatnot. Okay. Let's get on to some of these clips that I have from OTAs today. We appreciate you guys all being here today with us. Keep those questions coming, and we will be sure to get to as many as we can, including some of the Jeffrey Simmons talk, which I think is, we can have that discussion as well. Obviously did not see him out there once again. Obviously, this is all voluntary workouts and voluntary OTAs, right? So nothing mandatory. So once again, I'll preface that conversation by saying, like, if he's not there at mandatory minicamp, then you have a problem. But let's get to some of these clips. And I found a lot of today's clips from both Brian Callahan, from the position coaches, very interesting, because it seemed like there was a lot of talk about development And I think that's what this OTAs period has really been about. The development of Cam Ward, this connection with Calvin Ridley, the wide receivers, T'Vondre Sweat, the offensive line, all these different types of things. Like that is what this time serves as, right? Developing. And then when you get to training camp, that's where you have to, be to a certain level to make the team. And so, and to be what is considered a starter or a one, right? And so that's what this part is. A lot of learning still happening, a lot of things still being implemented, and a lot of players, young or new, I should say, like learning and taking all this in. So it's never going to be perfect, right? But that's what this part of the process in the offseason really is. And so we can start with Cam Ward, who, once again, going back to the conversation of today's practice served as, maybe ups and downs, but ultimately can help in the growth and development of Cam Ward. Brian Callahan had an interesting answer on the idea of what these practices serve as for Cam, and certainly trying to balance, I would say, the difference between trying to, take the check down like he did a little bit more today versus last week of, really just trying to sling it, get it into tight windows, make those types of big plays and impressive plays. Here's what Brian Callahan had to say.
For sure. One of the things that's good about, these practice settings too is we do encourage those guys to try throws, and particularly for Cam, new scheme, new concepts, maybe footwork's different. Coverage structures are more varied, different things that show up. So try things out. It's sort of the message that we tell all those guys. And if you want to try an aggressive throw, try it out. We're going to point out where and when it could be better. Here's your other alternative. But this time of year is for finding out what you can do later. There also is a time that you got to understand that we're trying to move the ball forward, and you can't take negative plays, and you don't want to take sacks. The ball. So how can you best protect the ball? Those are all sort of ongoing conversations, but certainly encourage guys in practice to be aggressive and try throws that they can see what it feels like.
Certainly try things out. Like I said, this is the learning period, right? And I think that is something specifically going back to our conversation on last offseason with Will Levis versus this offseason with Cam Ward. It feels like that process of trying things out, kind of learning as you go, learning with each rep, is something that they can do now versus having to start in training camp, because Will Levis had to work on his mechanics and they had to work on trying to fix the things that they needed to with him. And so I think it's a great step in the right direction. And I think it's what OTA should be, right? And I think it goes into what we saw today, right? Learning to take some of those checkdowns, but still trying things out, still trying to work on that connection and that timing, right? With Cam, obviously with some of the throws being thrown behind him, but ultimately it's all just a trial and error period for him in trying to get him as comfortable as possible for when things have consequences in training camp and beyond.
Yeah. And it seems like we're kind of getting, like we're seeing both sides of the spectrum and taming a wild horse, right? Like they always say, it's easier to rein them in than it is to get them to go, kind of deal. And I think that was part of the problem last summer, is that, there was a lot that they were working on where they kind of had to get Will Levis to go, kind of deal. And with Cam Ward, it kind of sounds like he's more comfortable taking more chances, being a little more aggressive. But at least he's kind of going for it, right? Like at least he's out there willing to make the mistakes, shake it off, and move on to the next play. And I feel like that does kind of put him a little further into the process than Will Levis was at this time last year. So it's an interesting dynamic. I kind of feel like we've seen both sides of that over the last 2 summers.
Yeah, I think that is one of the most interesting and fascinating parts of this offseason. Coach Wills here, excuse me, says, I think the goals of these OTAs as a coaching staff is to provide every player with all the answers to a test. So in July and August, there was no excuses for bad execution. I think certainly that is a part of the puzzle here, as well as Zedin saying, sounds like Callahan is taking the Burrow approach instead of the Levis approach with Cam, which obviously probably a more, mentally sound passer and things like that. So I think that's very fair.
To Coach Wills's point about providing the answers to the test, I thought that was a particularly insightful little nugget that just kind of Brian Callahan just kind of slips out in passing, is like talking about new concepts that Ward is going to be playing with, and the coverage is being different. Like, now's the time, just throw it out there and see how he reacts to it. And it is something that, yes, we've drawn parallels between the Miami offense and Brian Callahan's offense from a year ago. But the reality is, while you can take some of the things that Ward is obviously comfortable with, you can't make that your entire offense. Like, he's going to have to learn some of the other stuff at some point. So why not now just see, you have the confidence that it's not going to completely break him mentally to face some of these things. Go ahead and put it out there. Throw some of the crazier coverage schemes and the disguises and all that stuff. Throw it out there. See how he reads it. See how he reacts to it. Now is the time to be doing this. And like Coach Will said, now's the time. You get the answers and you study over the course of the next couple of months, and you see where you're at in the preseason.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. We can talk about some of the other wide receivers here, as well as, some one more thing on Cam Ward, I will say, is from his quarterbacks coach, Bo Hardegree, who we got to talk to as well today. I think he had a really interesting answer on the type of player that he is as well. Here's what he had to say on how Cam is progressing, as well as something interesting on how he works and fixes the issues with his footwork. I thought this was pretty interesting. Give it a listen.
Everything we expected. He's brought, he's working really hard every day, improving, taking the coaching. He gets in, he works a lot on his own, which is impressive within the constraints that we have. He works after practice, and he's just looking to improve every day. He's very natural because he's a really good athlete. He's got a lot of good feel. One thing he can do is, if it's not quite right, he can fix it on the next one. He can just feel it. And it's really just timing his footwork in now with his progressions. So coming from college, kind of just having the same footwork every time, now to timing it up so now he can listen to his feet and then we'll start to tell him things. And that's a growing progress, which he's improving every day. And so I've been very pleased with where we're at.
Man, that's insightful stuff.
That was really interesting as well.
There we go.
I think the idea that he working on feeling his footwork and timing that up to the progression and timing that up maybe to, like you were alluding to, the throws and whether they're behind or not. Like, that is another interesting aspect of the development for Cam. And I think that was incredibly insightful from Hardegree today on, how Cam works and how the process happens for a quarterback like Cam. So very, very interesting stuff.
Yeah. And I think it is, it's important to discuss that because you do see it on tape. I mean, now that hearing Bo Hardegree mention it, I'm thinking back towards tape from last year. And it is kind of like the same sort of rhythm on just about every drop back. Taking a couple of steps, however many, 3, 5, whatever the offense called for, and just hitting your back foot and going from there. But like, this is going to be different. The conditions aren't going to be perfect. There are going to be more quick throws where it might be a different sort of cadence where you're getting the ball and releasing it. So I do think that's something, again, now's the time to start working on that stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. Let's get to some of the wide receivers, get back on the talk with not just Xavier Restrepo, but a lot of the young guys, Elik Iomanner, Chimere Dike, a lot of these guys, and talk about what they view as the most important parts of this offseason program for those guys. But before we do that, have to give a nice shout out to our lovely sponsor, M.L.ROSE Craft Beer and Burgers, 7 locations in the greater Nashville area: Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and coming soon to Inglewood near East Nashville. M.L.ROSE is simply the best to do it in town. Why? Because they have over 25 beers on tap and an incredible selection, as well as the menu of craft burgers and other options that they have are just unbeatable, from their appetizers like the pretzel bites and the Nashville hot cheese curds, all the way to their burgers every single month where they have a specialty burger. You cannot go wrong at M.L.ROSE. Once again, 7 locations across the greater Nashville area. Got to check them out, whether you're going for date night, watching a game, playoff sports, or going before an event or anything like that. Make sure you choose M.L.ROSE because they simply have the best to offer, as well as our other sponsor, Sinkers Beverages, a 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year. Sinkers Beverages, located in East Nashville, has been serving that local community for over 40 years, and for good reason. They have the best selection of beer, wine, and spirits in town. And when you're shopping with them, you got to sign up for the in-crowd for special benefits, allocations, and tastings that you only know about when you sign up for the in-crowd. You can shop Sinkers at sinkersbeverages.com and let them know the Hot Read podcast sent you. Jordan Pace here says the M.L.ROSE fried pickles and peppers are aphrodisiacs. I would agree. They're some of my favorites over there as well. Jacob Sane here getting us back on track, saying in all seriousness, Bryce Oliver has nice feet. He looked awesome on the ladder. I think there were a lot of guys who looked really impressive on the ladder and in individual drills, right? Like, I think, once again, a guy that keeps standing out. Elic Iomanor hasn't had that big wow play in 7-on-7s or in 11-on-11s, but like still just a fluid route runner in drills. Like, I think he looks really impressive. Chimray Dike looks fast in his own way as well, and I think that was really impressive. Had a few good plays today as well. And then, like I said, Van Jefferson, Xavier Restrepo, those types of guys. Like, I think there is reason to have healthy optimism about this wide receiver group, because even though the pads aren't on, like, I feel like we're talking about this room a lot differently than we did last year. Like, I think there's a lot of things to be excited about with them.
Yeah, and you know, like they didn't invest premium draft capital in the position, but I think what they got on day 3 was really good value, and the traits and the athleticism, those are things that are showing up now. And I think that is where the upside is with this group, that, man, you've got speed, you've got the athleticism, you've got those sorts of physical traits that you can't necessarily coach. That's a great foundation to build off of. And to me, it's kind of the thing that the back end of this group was lacking last year. So they've really fortified it to now, like, you might not have a lot of proven talent, established guys, but man, you've got some guys that can move. You've got some guys with juice at this point on the back end of that receiving core.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was interesting to ask both Brian Callahan and Tyke Tolbert today about how versatile this room can be. How are you spreading them out, whether it be at a certain position, trying to see what they can do at multiple positions, and just trying to figure out the best suited role for all of these guys. And here's what Brian Callahan had to say about his wide receiver group going into the 2025 season.
We have a pretty good feel for where we think they naturally fit, and then we're putting guys in positions to see what they can handle as far as volume goes, as far as position movement goes, how much can guys move. This is a bit of a learning period for us, especially about a lot of new players, a lot of young players at the position. So we're just trying to find out where they best fit. We have some pretty good ideas of what we think they're capable of doing, but we're sort of pushing them and testing them on those limits and where we can use them and how we can use them. But so far, been happy with that group and where they progressed to. There's some good, fun, young, talented players.
So that, wanting to use different types of players in different roles, but obviously the slot position is still the big one, right? Because Tyler Lockett is really the only, proven slot guy on this team, I would say right now. If you don't have anything behind Tyler Lockett, like you're once again, like the guy who has the most experience, you're looking at Mason Kinsey, you're looking at Jaquan Jackson in terms of guys who have played the position at the NFL level before, right? And maybe that can be Xavier Restrepo and beat them out. Maybe that can be Chimray Dike and whatnot. But like, I think that's one of the more interesting positions within the position right now, which is that. And we asked Brian Callahan exactly, does that versatility lend itself to playing the position, or is it more so like, is the slot more so it has to be a certain type of guy? And here's what he had to say on that.
Kind of learn it every day. We're trying to integrate the veteran guys, and this might be just a bit different for them than normal, than what they're used to. So they're all learning, but it's been a good process. There's definitely a route tree inside that takes a particular skill set to do. There's teams I think you're finding more and more have more of slot receivers because formations are condensed, and so a lot of things are inside the numbers, and it's you're kind of working with like 2 or 3 different versions of slot players. I think the Rams are a good example of that style of offense. But there's a lot of different ways you can use players, and there's a lot of different body types that you can use inside. But there is a certain skill set you have to have. There's a recognition you have to have, and a feel, because everything inside is different than it is just going one-on-one in the corner, or just being able to see a corner or safety. That part is a lot more challenging for those guys inside.
So once again, right, they are trying to get their guys to be as versatile as possible. However, they do need a certain skill set to play in that slot. And whether that is Restrepo, whether that is Jaquan Jackson, a Mason Kinsey, Chimere Dike playing that big slot type of, being that big slot type of player, like it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But it seems like they have a lot of different ways that they can use their wide receivers this year. And that was once again emphasized by the wide receiver coach, Tyke Tolbert, when we asked him about the, what really stands out to you from this wide receiver group this year. And this is what he had to say.
I like the versatility of all the players. Again, every time we install players, we install the whole system, install it by concept, and those guys, especially the newer guys, have been able to catch on really fast and play multiple positions. It's showing how smart they are, and so that's for everybody. I think the versatility of all the players is probably the best thing about this group.
Is that the biggest point of emphasis for them, the younger guys right now, just kind of figuring out, all right, what makes the most sense, what can you do, what are your strengths, versus how we're going to deploy it?
Yeah, I think right now they're just trying to learn everything. It's up to us as coaches to put them in the best position as far as where they fit into the system. But so right now, everybody's learning everything, and as it gets going, we'll be able to determine, okay, this guy does this better, this guy does this better, so we'll be able to position better.
Once again, the versatility, a big part, and they're working through it. But you'd like to see some of those guys start to step up, like maybe Xavier Restrepo did today, because Button Diamond says, may God have mercy on our souls if Jaquan touches another ball in the game for the Titans. Which, certainly did not have, did he run even a single route last year for them? That wasn't just a...
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't remember. So that would be interesting. But yeah, wide receiver is still just a position where we have to see where the puzzle pieces kind of fall before we can really start to get into, maybe mocking different, like these will be the X's, these will be the Z's, this will be the F, type of things.
Let's put Iamaner in the slot. Let's get him a few reps in there. Let's put Chig in the slot. Let's get a couple reps there. I want to see some creativity, because it sounds like this staff is just all in on, like, let's figure out what these guys can do. Let's put everybody everywhere. It can't hurt, right? Specifically, like if Brian Callahan's talking about, if you want to try something with Cam Ward or the quarterbacks, do it. Like, this is the time. Like, definitely feels like that they could be searching all different avenues for their wide receivers right now, which leads us to our next position group that is once again looking to develop and make a big step into 2025, the offensive line, which we got to talk to Bill Callahan today about the offensive line and how they are progressing along, as well as, we talked about Eddie saying, get me Latham in the slot. Yeah, at this point, like, anything is on the table. But we talked about how there may have been an adjustment period that lasted well into the season for the Bill Callahan system for a lot of these offensive linemen. And, once again, I think there is I think there is an argument to be made that with 2 new veterans in the room, with a second-year J.C. Latham,
with a third year. Peter Skoronski with Lloyd Cushenberry coming back into the mix eventually, who has some familiarity already with Bill Callahan. Like, things probably need to develop and get into sync faster than they did last year. And so we asked Bill Callahan about how the offensive line has progressed, and also about that acclimation period and how that is going and how fast that needs to happen for this group.
Now, we're just really focused on going back to fundamental techniques. And I got to tell you, the line has worked extremely hard, not only in the classroom, but on the field this spring. It's still coming together. We got a few pieces that have to get back in phase, with Lloyd coming off his rehab, as well as Kevin. So once we get those two fellows back in, I think we'll have a better idea. I think we have a good vision. I think we'll have a better idea as it unfolds during training camp.
It took some.
I think so. I think in a lot of respects, when you have continuity and you have stability and you have consistency, I think those three factors are huge. And you have a foundation to build off of. And so it's not as new. And so it becomes a matter of now refining, because everything that we did last year, as we looked at it on tape during this off season as a unit and as a position, we really kind of delved into, the factors of why things broke down and why things were good. And so when the players have a general concept and idea of how they need to improve, having been in the system for 1 year, I think it's easier to make that improvement transition.
Some good stuff from Bill Callahan, specifically on needing continuity and needing, you would like all 5 of your offensive linemen to play all 17 games, something that the Titans cannot do. And the hope is that with this new group, 2 guys, Dan Moore and Kevin Zeitler, who have rarely missed a game, Lloyd Cushenberry coming back, and Peter Skoronski and J.C. Latham being young and relatively healthy. Like, you want to see that continuity, I think, because otherwise, like he says, it really breaks down fast. And having to get some of those guys in, whether it be some of the young guys like Jalen Duncan, like John Ojukwu, like Corey Levin, who, by the way, is rocking a sick flow now. I mean, the hair is just out and about, out the back of his helmet. New for him. Those guys obviously not being able to work and get that action all the time is why things start to break down for this group. And so it's really a testament to this group needing to stay healthy this year in order to have success.
Yeah. And it was really interesting to hear him kind of shed some light on players taking the leap once they've been in the system for long enough. It's like, you understand now, you have a base understanding of the system. You see why things break down. It's easier, it's quicker for you to make the adjustments to improve because of that base understanding. So that is something that you hope for the guys that were here, like Peter Skoronski, J.C. Latham, even maybe Lloyd Cushenberry to a certain extent, that those issues can be sorted out. The experience in the system is something that has bitten them in the ass in the last couple of years, because these guys just can't stay healthy, or they're just bad, and we're seeing a revolving door at right tackle. It's kind of hard to get experience if you're not on the field, that sort of thing. So the performance has been an issue, but it sounds like this is a more cohesive approach, and with the knowledge base that a lot of these guys have, which is something that I've heard that the older players are kind of taking to the younger players because of the experience in the system. I think the hope is that ultimately this thing all gels together much quicker than it did last year, if you would even say that it gelled at all.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. Jacob saying, Corey Levin, if I grow a mullet, they won't recognize me when they try to cut me. There you go. Foolproof plan.
Listen,
this year.
It doesn't matter if they cut Corey Levin. He's just, every time they cut him, he comes back 2 more times. So
exactly. Let's get to one more position group and then get to some of your questions to round out the show today. Last one, we talked a little bit about them on Friday's show, but got to talk to Frank Bush, the interior linebackers coach, today about that wide open, competition that they are currently having between Cedric Gray, James Williams, Otis Reese, a lot of veterans, David Gabenda, the UDFA. Like there's a lot of guys vying for spots on this team. And I think that it's going to be one of the most interesting battles to watch. But also we heard how, it is still a ways away before we get to see that battle really take place with the pads. And so we talked to Frank Bush today about guys like Cedric Gray, James Williams, how they are looking to make a year 2 leap, or in Cedric Gray's case, just, get on the field, right, from last year. I asked him as well about what can stand out in that competition when the pads aren't on, and what they're working on now, as well as who is currently in the lead at that position in that pecking order. And so here's what he had to say on those.
He's doing a good job right now. He's all the way back physically, and now I'm kind of inundating himself in the defense and learning those stuff. But you got to remember, he did come back during the season, so he's not as far behind as you think. It is good to get him out here during this time of year, and look forward to getting him in training camp, seeing how he operates. Kind of on a full-time basis. He has a chance to be one of the guys that's on the line.
Are you seeing him kind of rise to that occasion?
Yeah, he's doing a great job. Like I said, everybody's growing and learning, and they're trying to get a feel for, Cody and how that all operates. But he's doing a great job. He's physically fit. He's learning the defense. He's taking leadership, taking on ownership of the defense. He's doing a good job for us. The pass had a whole another element, but ultimately, they need to understand our drops. They need to understand our coverage systems and all that stuff. So when it's time to be physical, they don't find themselves behind the 8 ball because they were behind a play and not understanding the drop. And now you can see them express themselves with their pass as well as their aptitude or whatever you want to call it. I mean, they know our system. And we expect them to be ahead. They know our system, and so it's kind of by default that they're ahead of those guys. But I will say this: they both have done a tremendous job. They were here for the most part during the off season, and they've learned the defense. They're taking ownership. They both run with the ones, and they're holding their own right now.
So seems like as of right now, Cedric Gray and James Williams are battling it out. As both day 3 prospects from last year who are in the pole position or tied for that pole position to be the starting interior linebacker next to Cody Barton, although wouldn't rule out a lot of these other guys. Once again, we talked about this on Friday. Otis Reese seems to make a little magic happen when the pads come on. That physicality is an important part of it as well. But, guys who have been in this room know the system, know the defense now after a year, certainly look like they have a leg up against some of these guys who came in from New England and the Saints and, UDFA type players.
Yeah, and man, like these are the 2 guys you want to grow into that role. These are your 2 young linebackers you drafted last year. I know they were technically Rand Carthon picks, but listen, there's some promise here with Cedric Gray and James Williams, and these are the guys that you're evaluating to see whether or not you've got something there, or if this is something that you're just gonna need every draft. Basically, it's like till you find the guy. Cody Barton, the way they talk about him so glowingly, I feel like he's pretty well entrenched in that Mike spot, but the other spot is open season for a lot of these guys. But Gray and Williams, you look at their positioning on the team, and I do think they're the guys that, yeah, I think if you asked Frank Bush, he'd probably say like, yeah, I want one of these guys to really rise up, and it sounds like they're there in terms of at least understanding the system and understanding the defense. And now to your point, JT, which we've also heard, I think it was Brian Callahan last week say linebacker's kind of a tough position. Maybe it was Denard. Linebacker's a tough position to really evaluate until the pads come on. So there is that step, but it sounds like it's so far so good for those 2. Now we just got to see them do it on the field.
Yeah, and I just real quick to that point of like them looking out on the field today, like I forgot how big and kind of an anomaly James Williams is at the linebacker position. I mean, standing there at 6'5" is kind of crazy when you look at him next to a Cedric Gray or a Cody Barton or any of these other linebackers. I mean, just brings a different type of skill set that I think you may want with your coverage linebacker. And so I think as of right now, Cedric Gray also has some of those chops. James Williams still learning to get into that position, but also has the rare skill set for a guy playing linebacker. So going to be really interesting to see that battle unfold this training camp and the rest of the offseason. Okay, let's get to some of your questions here before we get out of here on a Tuesday. Stephen Crozio brings up something interesting. He says, the fact that Jeffrey Simmons hasn't shown up at OTAs at all proves we're in for a repeat of the A.J. Brown trade, which I think is not totally fair to a guy like Jeffrey Simmons. And here's why. Like,
Yeah.
I know we talked about Jeffrey Simmons last week and not being at OTAs, which are voluntary. And obviously, when basically 89 or 90 of the 91 guys on the roster report and Jeffrey Simmons is the only one, I think that it's a little tough, right? to bad look for him for a team that is looking to cultivate leaders. However, I will push back by way of saying we've learned today that Jeffrey on that the different types of Harry Potter style teams, like as Jacob said, how did Ravenclaw perform today? Like in the point scoring system with the 8 different teams, Jeffrey Simmons is a captain of one of these teams. And so, still very much involved. And Calvin Ridley even let us know that Jeff's team is in first place. So take that as you will. But it certainly seems like no one really has a problem with it in the building as of right now, because obviously they're still talking about it as Jeff's team that he's leading for this group and how they're in first and whatnot. And so, I don't think it's as big of an issue. Like I said, when we get to mandatory minicamp in the next week and a half or so, and he's not there, then you have a major problem. And that's when you can start to really peel back some of the curtains and speculate as to why he isn't there. But as of right now, after learning today that Jeffrey Simmons is a team captain for one of these 8 teams, certainly once again implements in my mind that he's still very much a proven leader on this team and will continue to be.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see where this thing goes, because like you said, like you're in the infancy of a new era for the Titans. And from the outside looking in, I will say that I think at the very least, regardless of what the reality is in the building, perception wise, I think his decision to not be out there is at least allowing people like us the opportunity to criticize him for it.
Yeah, I think that is a fair way of explaining it. So once again, I just thought I'd throw that out there, because I wouldn't see him if he truly was fed up with the organization or wanting out. Like, there's no way he would have been a captain or would be a captain, right?
Yeah,
you certainly wouldn't think so, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
And it may be like they're saying here in the comments, the way he works out and the way he goes about his off season, made a release an IG workout video real quick, to deflect the criticism and show that he's still working. It may just be that he works in a different way, but nonetheless, still just not the best of optics for what you would presume to be last year, at least the top leader in the locker room. Forrest R here says, on the throws behind the receiver issue, I don't remember many throws too far in front of the receiver in Cam's take. Makes me think it's a timing issue, which is hopefully more fixable than accuracy. I think that is definitely fair, and I think it just comes with time with some of these things. But for Cam, it certainly seems they're still working through that. I know Calvin Ridley also had an answer today on working on that timing with Cam Ward, basically saying like, whoever, regardless of whose fault it was, either me missing the route or Cam missing the throw, I do my best. I being Calvin Ridley, he said he did his best to go back to Cam and be like, how can I do that better? Or like getting him as comfortable as he can versus trying to fit Cam into what Calvin needs. Right. And I think that's another really positive way to look at what Cam and this wide receiver core are doing this offseason. And so I think it's still a work in progress, I should say, for him, but still good to see that these guys are working through it together, because Cam also said on the connection between himself and Ridley, he said, if I'm not clicking, then Ridley's not clicking and this offense isn't clicking. So like that's two big parts of this offense that really need to do their best about being on task together.
Yeah. And to Forrest's point, I do think that if it was like a question of just pure accuracy, you would see balls scattered all over the place. It wouldn't just be this one weird quirk where every now and then he throws behind a wide receiver that's breaking in on like a slant or crosser or something like that. So I don't know. I tend to agree. I do think that probably is some sort of timing issue. Like I said, I mean, hand up, I don't really know enough about quarterback mechanics when you're starting to break down like footwork and throwing motion and all that to understand if it's a mechanical issue or if it is a sort of feel mental thing. But I just thought it was interesting that this was brought up in the OTAs as well, because it's something that is transferring from his Miami tape.
Yeah. And Christopher asks, how are the tight ends looking at practice? Thought Chig had a few good balls today. Once again, Gunnar Helm is working just like a rookie. Hasn't, shown a bunch of flashes, but still getting in the mix there along with Josh Wiley. In terms of like wide receiver tight ends that I think are producing the most in these drills, like I'd say Chig is still, making the most of his opportunities, and you have some other guys trying to get in the mix, but it's going to be an interesting battle once you see the pads get on, because I think that's one of the more interesting, that is more interesting than, say, these guys just running routes in 12 personnel without pads on, right? I think you're not going to get too much out of that. But I will say that Chig looks good. I think Gunnar Helm and Josh Wiley have looked fine so far. And so I think that's a good sign for them for sure. And so that is where we are on that with the tight ends. And then Kenneth asking, I will take problems in training camp more seriously this year and counting on hope. 2 years ago, the offensive line was awful in camp. Last year, Levis struggled to connect with Ridley. Also NPF, which if you saw today, NPF was cut from the 49ers. So certainly did not last too long there as well.
I'm with Kenneth there. That's what we call good self-awareness. We're showing good emotional intelligence here. We're growing as a fan base. Thank you, Kenneth. 2
more, and then we'll get out of here. Brandon Tyler says, how big of a deal is it that Sweat never worked out with Jeff like Jeff had said they would? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with that story.
I make plans with my friends all the time that I cancel on. So, and especially working out somewhere, maybe just Sweat said he was in Houston for most of the offseason, obviously close to where his family is. Maybe that obviously could have just been, I want to be close to my family and work on things in the offseason rather than go somewhere and work on things. I think it could be as easy as that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd want to know more about that story than before I weigh in on it, because I mean, it could have been that they tried and they just couldn't work it out. I mean, I don't know if Sweat elaborated on that or what. I mean, people seem to be taking that and just saying, wow, Jeffrey Simmons, what a
people are trying to find any which way to pile on Jeffrey Simmons right now, which
I don't think he's the most popular Titan right now.
No. And then Kenneth, final question here, says, what remains the biggest concern for you both till we see it in season, middle linebacker or pass rush? I think it's pass rush. Like I need to see it, I need to see the results of that. Obviously, Cody Barton is kind of a known quantity at this point in the league. You know what you're getting. I think you have different expectations for the middle linebackers because obviously they did not put a lot of capital draft or salary wise into that position. So it's fair to say that if you're looking for a weak point already on this team, it's going to be the middle linebacker. So the expectations are a little different, I think, there than they would be with the pass rush. So I think I'd have to go pass rush.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And something else that I wrote about today on Stacking the Inbox is that I do kind of get the sense that this is going to be a pretty multiple defense. And I think Cody Barton's going to be the guy in the middle of that unit. And then I think next to him, I'm kind of coming around on this idea that I don't know if there is going to be like a true linebacker too. Like it kind of feels like they'll have a starter. We heard Denard Wilson talk about it last week about, you may have certain players in on first and second, and then different players in on third down. When you're in dime, you're going to have a different linebacker. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with somewhat of a platoon approach to that second linebacker spot, where you are seeing guys like Cedric Gray, James Williams, Otis Reese, kind of swapping, taking turns next to Cody Barton there. And then there may be situations where Cody Barton's the guy off the field and Cedric Gray is the lone linebacker, or James Williams. Like you talk about his like nose for the football and his willingness to just crash the play. I mean, James Williams Mike could rush the passer on third down, and that may be a different skill set than some of the other guys. Like Otis Reese played safety at Ole Miss. Maybe he could be your dime linebacker in those spots. So I'm not too terribly concerned about that middle linebacker spot until we start getting into, the live rounds are flying and it's a liability. I think they can kind of patch something together that works enough for this year to get them to a, oh my gosh, the first time we're saying it this year, another player acquisition cycle.
There you go.
We're already talking about next year's player acquisition cycle.
We're already talking about it. I love it. All right. Well, when we start talking about next year's player acquisition cycle, I think that means it's time for us to wrap it up on this show. Thank you guys for all tuning in today. Thought it was a good conversation about what we learned from OTAs. Thank you to M.L.ROSE Craft Beer and Burgers, 7 locations across the greater Nashville area, as well as Sinkers Beverages, who, always, if you need beer, wine, spirit needs, got to check out Sinkers. Kenneth says, when is the next open media day? I believe it's in a week and a half or 2 when mandatory mini camp begins, but we'll have more dates and information on that sooner rather than later. But until Friday, when we are back with some sort of topic, maybe we'll have a guest on or talk more, get into the weeds about, quarterback mechanics and things like that. I don't know. We'll see. But this has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you then. Have a good week, everybody.